You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
As we begin surveying the area, I can only think about what the ancestor was going through. I'm looking ahead of me and I see but thick woods and farmland. If anyone is familiar with the eastern shore of Maryland, first you have to cross over a bunch of water, swamps. You're dealing with alligators, you're dealing with snakes, you're dealing with all of the adversaries, but most importantly, the most evil of the adversaries with the slave traders. And looking at her birthplace right now, as you can see, it's wide open farmland. So just imagine in her time, in the 1800s, she's trying to, go through all of this wood line to free not only herself but others. And then you have those who did not want to be free. This is just a complete honor to me. Today's video is going to take you on a journey in which our great ancestor had to go through to achieve her greatness on freeing slaves, beginning with herself. As you can see written on the post, it states that the Moses of our people, Harriet Tubman of the Bucktown district, found freedom for herself and some 300 other slaves whom she led north in the Civil War. She served the Union Army as a nurse, scout, and spy. I'm in Dorchester County on the eastern shore of Maryland. It took me 2 hours plus to get from my home to here. It takes approximately 2 days for me to walk from my home to here. This great ancestor achieved all of that in a matter of months. I want you to go on this journey with me and enjoy the birthplace of Harriet Tubman. All right, family. I'm arriving at the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center. I just left the farmland in which Harriet Tubman was a slave of before she escaped from slavery. So I'm going to go in the visitor center and we're going to take a tour and get the insight in the life of Ms. Harriet Tubman. Let's go learn something.
Hello, how are you? My name is Ranger Angela Crenshaw, and this is Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park. I'm going to take you on a quick tour. First, I'd like to point out the fact that our park is on a south to north orientation. Right now you are facing north. It is bright and it is open, but we are in the southern portion of the park where it is dark and enclosed because during Tubman's time, slavery was encumbered. Slavery was restricting. Slavery made African Americans into property. If you look up and you look down and you look to my sides, you'll see that the ceiling, the floor, and the walls have you looking south to north as well. Now let's begin our journey. This is the first section of our exhibit hall. We show you images that show the beauty of the Choptank River region where Tubman was born. But then we also show you images that portray the ugliness of African American slavery. Some of these images, including these, show the daily life of enslaved people. But we also have quotes from Tubman. And the quote here says, "Slavery is the next thing to hell. If a person would send another into bondage, he would send them into hell if he could." Harriet Tubman, 1855. The song that we're hearing is called Deep River, and it is sung by a Canadian orchestra, or Canadian choir, excuse me. It's been slowed down significantly, and that was done on purpose. We want you to stop and slow down and realize you're coming to Harriet's house. You're here to learn about Harriet Tubman. Put your phone down and enjoy the journey. This picture is especially significant because it was taken where Tubman was born, on private property. This image shows the Blackwater River region, which is what surrounds us. Our lovely state park is 17.33 acres, and we are surrounded by Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, which preserves this view. I want to point out this image here. This is Gordon. He ran away from slavery and he joined the Union Army. When he was changing, they noticed the scarring on his back, and that was used for abolitionist material. If you look behind you right here, this is one of my favorite sections of the park. I call this our Great Wall of Tubman. This contains every image we have of Miss Tubman, including the youngest one where she's in her 40s and her oldest one. This shawl contains, this is the shawl that is located at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It was given to her by the Queen of England. What I also like is that when she is standing here, she stands at life size, 5 feet tall. Miss Tubman was not very tall, but she was mighty. This is her Civil War image where she has her sharpshooter rifle, and this is another later in life image of Mrs. Tubman. If we head right this way, we'll begin the exhibit portion of our tour. So this is a good place to explain how our exhibits are laid out. They start with a quote from Ms. Tubman, we have vivid imagery, and then we have our tactile panels here. Here the quote says, I grew up like a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty, having no experience of it, and I was not happy or contented. Harriet Tubman, 1855. The image here shows very young enslaved children. You'll notice that only the 2 oldest ones have shoes, and that there's some very young children in the background here. Then we have a little bit of text explaining what daily life was like for enslaved people on the Eastern Shore. And we have this very important tactile panel. Anything that you read about, you can touch. We have raised English here, and we have Braille. And of course, I grew up in Maryland, so I know what oysters feel like, but it's very important for those who did not grow up in Maryland to know what oyster shells feel like, to feel a piece of timber, and to really experience farming and the agriculture that is located here. The next section I want to highlight here says, the first thing I remember was lying in the cradle. The rest of that quote is, when an enslaved child was born, a sweet gum tree was cut down, it was hollowed out, and it added a headboard and a footboard, and that was the child's cradle. 2 local artists were kind enough to recreate this cradle, so I welcome you to come when you visit to actually touch this cradle. I know it looks very smooth and very nice, but the inside is still pretty rough. It's a pretty rough place to put a little baby. This shows young Harriet, or young Araminta Ross, which was her given name, taking care of her younger brother, either Moses or Henry. Now she has fond memories of this, but I couldn't imagine the worry that her mother experienced, knowing that her baby, young Araminta, was taking care of her other baby, either Moses or Henry, while she worked in the big house from sunup to sunset. So once again, this shows Tubman taking care of her much younger brother. That also shows the harshness of slavery. This section right here shows Tubman at work. This was very, very important because the timber fields of South Dorchester County is where Harriet Tubman learned the skills necessary for her to become a successful conductor on the Underground Railroad. Ms. Tubman would have been one of the few, if not the only women working in the timber fields. She would have been working alongside her father, Ben Ross, who was a respected timber foreman, as well as her brothers. So this shows her hauling timber. The forests of South Dorchester County are very thick, and the lumber was perfect for shipbuilding. So this shows the gentleman cutting down the wood. Before a canal was built, it was back-breaking labor to drag the timber through the woods into the shipbuilding towns of Madison, Wolford, and Church Creek. However, Stewart's Canal was built, and that's what this shows. So Stewart's Canal is about 7 miles long. It was dug over 20 years in fits and starts by both free and enslaved African Americans. That really helped increase the timber harvest. Instead of dragging the timber through the woods, you could float it down the canal to the shipbuilding towns. And this shows Ms. Tubman with her 2 oxen. She was rented out for about $60 a year, and whatever was left over she got to keep. So she purchased 2 oxen, which allowed her to increase her yield and make more money. She was also able to purchase a lawyer to prove that her mother, Rick, should have been manumitted or freed when she was about 45 years old, also proving that Tubman and her sisters and brothers should have been freed as well. So this section talks about the skills that she learned in the timber fields, and it shows her working very diligently in the timber fields. The next thing we're going to highlight is her emancipations and her journeys on the Underground Railroad. What we're going to talk about here is Tubman's self-emancipation. So her owner was not doing very well financially. Enslaved people were, of course, property during Tubman's time. And when you're not doing well financially, you sell your property. She lost 3 sisters earlier in her life, Mariah, Reddy, Lina, and Soph, to the chain gang south, never to be seen again, and she did not want that fate for herself. So she decided she was going to self-emancipate herself from Poplar Neck in Caroline County. When she was leaving, her owner came home, and that's what this display shows. She sang the goodbye song to let her parents and family and friends know that she was leaving, just to give them the heads up. So she was singing the song, she opened the gate, her owner drove his horse through the gate, she closed the gate behind him, and she walked to freedom. She got help and assistance, of course, from a network of abolitionists and people who were against slavery called the Underground Railroad. The quote here says, "I had reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, for no man should take me alive." I also like to point out this runaway ad. This is the only runaway ad we have for Miss Harriet Tubman. And it lets us know a few certain things about her and her brothers Harry and Ben. This was posted by Eliza Brodus, who lived near Bucktown, Maryland, which is less than 5 miles from here. If you read it, you can find out that Harry was 19 years old and had a wen on the side of his neck. A wen is like a lump or a bump. And Ben was age 25 years old, and he was very quick to speak. And this is where we learn a lot about Harriet Tubman, or Young Minty, as she went by. We learn that she was 27 years old, chestnut color, fine looking, and about 5 feet tall. They were offered $100 if given for the award if taken out of state, and $50 if taken in state, to be placed in Baltimore, Easton, or Cambridge. So this ad is a very, very important piece of history. It's owned by the Bucktown Village Foundation, and they allow us to use it in our exhibits. As the goodbye song, she stopped at a Quaker safe house, she got a ride and a wagon, and she foraged for food. Once she got to Philadelphia, she proclaimed that freedom was heaven, and she got assistance from one of my Underground Railroad heroes, Mr. William Still. He was a famous Underground Railroad agent, and he wrote a book called The Underground Railroad that contains the accounts of everyone that came through his office. If you want to read direct accounts from the horse's mouth about what slavery was like, please read that book. I highly, highly recommend it. So when she got to Philadelphia, she was supported by William Still and the Philadelphia Vigilance Committee. Of freedom, she said, I found when I crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything, and the sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. Harriet Tubman, 1868. Now, of course, I was born a free woman in the United States, so I have no idea what it means to be enslaved. But this quote is where I send people when they ask me, what does freedom mean to me? I think it really sums it up. So this section right here talks about the Combahee River Raid during the Civil War. So on June 1st, 1863, Harriet Tubman became the first and only African American to lead and execute an armed raid during the Civil War. Harriet Tubman, the 2nd South Carolina Colored Troops, and the 3rd Rhode Island Battalion chugged up the Combahee River in 3 steam-powered gunships. In this display, you see 2 of them on the left there. It's because one of them got stuck, and they had to put everybody in the other 2. So they chugged over 20 miles up the Combahee River, and they blew up transportation routes. They flooded rice fields. They flooded and burned down plantations, and they freed and emancipated over 700 enslaved individuals. It is the largest emancipation event in the history of the United States. Afterwards, 100 to 110 men signed up for the Union Army with Tubman's help. What I really appreciate about this story isn't just the numbers and the safety, as nobody was injured, but she stayed down with those people, and she taught them various skills, how to cook and how to clean and how to take care of themselves. It just, to me, shows Harriet Tubman's passion and her love. She understood what it was like to go from being an enslaved piece of property to being your own citizen, and she wanted to help them with that transition. So I welcome you all to come and visit us at Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park and Visitor Center in beautiful and historic Church Creek, Maryland, and learn a little bit about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad in Maryland. Before I go, I want to tell you a little bit about our Junior Ranger activities if you'd like to take your discovery and your journey further. Our first Junior Ranger activity book is based on all of the exhibits here. We want you to have a personal connection to Miss Tubman and her life and legacy. Once you complete the activities, you are led in the Junior Ranger Pledge by an official ranger like myself or my staff, and you get this patch right here that contains our life-size bust of Miss Harriet Tubman, our Shiro, on it. If you want to go a little further, I challenge you to do our Sights and Sounds of Freedom Junior Ranger booklet. I'm sure you've heard all the songs and you've seen all the art here as I've been speaking, but I want you to come here and learn more about the art. We have art by Mark Priest and Jacob Lawrence. And we have various songs being played, and we want you to learn about the music and the art that was inspired by the freedom movement of the Underground Railroad. Once again, once you complete this booklet, you take the pledge, and you get this patch that has our mini rangers on them, Keziah and Trevelyan. Once again, come visit, learn a little bit about Harriet Tubman, and meet myself and other members of Team Tubman. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.